we do 2 rows up, is that possible? One shot again. Very well. That's my usual. Thank you so much. That's this way we can feel a little more together. I don't know how many people come, so this is they said 50 people signed up. So I hope 50 people show and more. Please take one.
I don't know for my stuff, but do we have to have a box for me?
One of those?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. And like, try not to sit too far in the back. Like, sit up close. This way you can take the pressure. No pressure.
So she's leaving.
The only thing I'll tell you is you can't tell people not to sit in Yes. Please come. Please sit towards the front rows if you can. That'd be great. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay. Here, there's a towel over here. Does he have a that's wonderful. There are totally two upstairs somewhere. Thank you so much. My pleasure.
I'm trying to.
You're welcome. I'm Josh. You're nice to meet you. Then take a booklet. Yeah, everyone should have a booklet. You sit wherever you want. That front row is perfect. Perfect. Come take a booklet. The auto was closed. It's locked.
Oh, it's a
Yeah,
lot.
so luckily I noticed that before we went to take out the tower.
I'm also your dad. How are you? That's a lot. Right? I think your sister's going to be teaching my daughter buckets. Oh, really? Yeah. How many Templar? Okay. know she likes sciences, but has no idea what she wants. So we all probably just got stuff wise to her. Yeah, my cousins are
Try not to sit too far back. Everyone's like filling up all the last space. we're going to start. Can you guys hear me if I speak right here? Yeah? Okay. Because I want to try to introduce myself and talk about what we're going to do today. Well, let's get started. First of all, my name is Rabbi Josh Colt. Wait, we'll take that one. That's okay. There's more over there. There's plenty more over here. If anyone needs, just ask and we can pass up another one. This one has a few notes in it. So my name is Rabbi Joshua Colt, Rabbi Josh, you can call me. And what I'm trying to do this morning, I want to introduce, I called it Nisayon, which means in Hebrew trial and attempt. It also means experience. It's a really interesting word in Hebrew. And we're going to try to do something a little bit different today, something a little bit different than you're familiar with for regular holiday services. And I have a whole bunch of goals. We're going to try to achieve many of those goals. And one of them is I'd like you to help understand what we're doing today. I think that the services can be very overwhelming, a lot going on, and just very passive and listening. So I want to try to help to understand how things got to be the way they are. It's something that's always interested me. How did our Jewish customs develop? How did they get to be the way they are today? Our services are going to be a little bit more focused, a little bit shorter, right? We're going to start most days at 11 o'clock, and we're going to finish before 12:30. I told Sammy before that I am a Yeki. I come from German background. We follow times, and that's one of my goals today because I think it's important to follow a schedule. I see my role here this morning and the other times we're together to be more of a teacher and less of a preacher. So I want to guide you through learning and understanding what we're doing as opposed to just sort of telling you exactly how to feel. And I will try to answer questions. I would like to create an atmosphere that is participatory, where if you have a question in the middle, you don't understand something, you can say, Rabbi Josh, can you explain something to me? And I will try. Sometimes there are things I don't have the answers for, but I'd like to try to explain as much as possible. And it's important to realize that a rabbi is not a priest. A rabbi here is not to perform services, but to help lead you and guide you through understanding what we're doing. I also would like it to be enjoyable. I think Rosh Hashanah services, different services should be fun, should be enjoyable, should be an experience that you look forward to every year. And to that, I want to make sure that everybody knows, I think probably most people know Sammy Moses. Or Sammy or Samuel?
Sammy's fine.
Sammy Moses. Sammy is going to be leading us through the prayer parts, through the singing. But again, many of you who have been here are familiar with Sammy. It's a real pleasure to be working with him. The two of us sat together and talked about what kind of experience we'd like to create. And I'm sure it's going to be very enjoyable and very participatory. And we're going to do a mixture. In my profession, I'm a teacher. I don't work at a synagogue as a rabbi, but I work as a teacher of Jewish texts. And we're going to look at some Jewish texts. So we're going to do a little bit of a mixture between praying. We are going to read the Torah. Because it's Shabbat, we are not blowing the shofar. No one blows the shofar on Shabbat. But we will blow the shofar tomorrow. What we're going to do, we'll start immediately tomorrow morning with the shofar blowing. So we'll be back tomorrow. And we're going to do a little bit of different learning this morning and next morning, tomorrow morning. So it'll be a little bit different today from tomorrow. So, any questions so far? Yeah? I mean it when I say feel free to ask questions. I really want to see this again.
What's the plan for making 5 pounds for challah, flour?
All right. So here's what I'm going to do. Right. That is it's a great question. I'm going to hold it off. If there's questions I don't want to talk about in front of everybody, please don't feel an ounce of hesitation to come to me afterwards and say, and I mean it, but I don't want to. It's like a little bit off of Rosh Hashanah topic. So come to me afterwards. I am in no rush to go anywhere. I'm happy to answer all of your questions, but don't take any offense if I say I want to just post it off a little bit because there's like a gazillion things I would love to know, and I can't cover them all today. So I can cover them whenever you want afterwards, wherever you want. All right, I want to look at some of the biblical texts, right? Everybody is familiar with the name of the holiday Rosh Hashanah, right? Which means the beginning of the new year, the beginning of the year. But when we look at the Bible, at the Torah, we find something very surprising. So I want you to look at page holiday that came to be known as Rosh Hashanah is not called Rosh Hashanah in the Bible. It is nowhere called Rosh Hashanah in the Bible. And there's very little of what we do today, the way we understand things today, that is there in the Bible. And we're going to do this today and tomorrow, a little bit of tracing of that. So when you look at page 1, I brought the two sources that talk about a holiday on the day that we are standing on today. I'm going to read these with you. I'll read them in English. I think just for ease, I'm going to do most of the reading. I just think it'll facilitate things. But I do want people to follow along. So God speaks to Moses saying, "Speak to the children of Israel thus, in the 7th month," notice, in the 7th month, "on the first day of the month, you shall observe complete rest," meaning don't do any work, "a sacred occasion commemorated with loud blast." So in the Hebrew, some of you might read some Hebrew, you might see the word "truah," which you're familiar with from the blowing of the shofar. We're going to talk about that. Truah means to sound a loud blast. And that's about it. You're not supposed to do any work. It says again, you're supposed to offer a sacrifice. So what strikes you about this? This is the holiday that we're observing today. What strikes you first of all about this? This is all it says in Leviticus. The first thing that's surprising.
First day of the year.
Yeah, it's the 7th month. Right? The first month in the Bible, throughout the entire Bible, is the month that we call Nisan, right, which is the month in the spring in which Passover falls. Right? That is called the beginning of the year. But we all celebrate Rosh Hashanah. We all think of the New Year as falling on this day. We are now on the first day of the 7th month. We'll come back to that in a second. What else might be a little bit surprising here? I think there's no, like, it doesn't say anything. It doesn't say it says somehow something about blast, but it doesn't have very much information. It is very, very little information in the Bible. And in the book of Numbers, the book that comes after that, we find something very similar. In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall observe a sacred occasion, meaning a holiday, a festival, if you will. You shall not work at your occupations. That's true of all holidays. It shall be for you a day of blasting. Okay? Yom Truah, which you may be familiar with in Hebrew. And then just another verse telling you to offer some sacrifices. But again, right, they don't say anything about this being the beginning of the new year. Matter of fact, anyone reading the Bible would immediately say it's the 7th month. Now, how many months are there in the year in the Bible? Interesting. 12, right? The same as us, right? It is interesting to think about that essentially, I'm not a historian of the calendar in the Western world, but I do believe that the Western world adopted the 12-month calendar based on Jewish and Babylonian actual practice. So it's not taken for granted that there should be 12 months, but it works out more or less with the evolution of the sun, of the earth and of the sun. But it's the 7th month, so there's 12 months in the year, and the 7th month is the beginning of the second half of the year. And I think a lot of you might say, look, if I ask you, when does the year begin? When does your year begin? Here in Toronto, when does your year begin? January 1st. Raise your hand if you think your year begins January 1st. Okay. Raise your hand if you have a different date. What's your date?
September.
Yeah, I think that a lot of us feel probably more intuitively that January 1st is a holiday, we don't work, we don't school, but there's really not much special going on. It's the heart of winter. There's not much special going on January 1st. It's an artificially imposed holiday. There would be two dates, and really when you think about what would make a new year, one of them is why September 1st? School. It's when the kids go back to school. Why do the kids go back to school September 1st? I don't know the history of this all, but it has to do with agriculture and farming, right? For a farmer, for people who live close to the land, you probably have two seasons, two beginnings of the year. One in the spring and one in the fall. That's when the seasons turn. So there is something very natural, I think, about beginning a new year now that even non-Jews feel maybe intuitively. And I think that's partly there. There's one other verse that I wanted to bring in that is relevant to our discussion, and that is from the bottom of the page. This is a verse about the Jubilee year. Now, according to the Bible, there's a cycle of 50 years. Jubilee, it's still in modern English, Jubilee, like when the Queen celebrated her Jubilee birthday or Jubilee reign, it was her 50th year. That all comes from a cycle of 50 years. And it says there in that context, then you shall sound a blast of the shofar. Notice in the Hebrew the shofar, right? The blast of the shofar in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month. Right? What's the 10th day of the month? Yom Kippur. Right? The 10th day of the 7th month is Yom Kippur. It follows a few days after Rosh Hashanah. You shall have the shofar sounded throughout your land. Now, that's the beginning of the Jubilee year. Why would we begin the Jubilee year on Yom Kippur, on the 7th month? Possibly there is already a sense in the Bible that, naturally speaking, in the way of the world, this is really the beginning of the year. Right? Even though we count from the spring, the two-part system, I think, probably makes a lot of sense in an agricultural society. Those of you who've been in Israel, right, if you spent time in Israel, I live in Israel, in September is the beginning of hope for rain. It usually doesn't rain, although it did rain last week. Usually it doesn't rain in September, but it starts to begin to rain in October, and it only rains through, let's say, April, roughly speaking. There is no rain. It never rains in the summer. I always come here to America, to Canada, come to America, and I'm always surprised. It rains a lot here in the summer, because in Israel, zero. You get zero rainfall. So there is, I think, a sense in the Torah already that there is a new year already in the fall, and that doesn't come across in the counting of the months, but it comes across in that other verse. Now, there's another thing that verse provides us information with. All throughout those two verses, the Torah said we should have a day of blasting. Right? What do you blast with? What do you make sounds with in the Torah? What can you use to make sounds with? So, shofar, and what else? Today, if you want to make a loud blast, what you use? But if you're playing in a band, right? You watch the football, I don't know, college football, American college football, and they march around. But the trumpets, right? Trumpets. The Bible is full of the sounds of trumpets. And it's very interesting that on Rosh Hashanah, the rabbis chose to use a shofar. Okay, I'm not going to read all these verses, but why would you think they chose to use a shofar?
It was available.
Okay, it's a little bit more easily available. Maybe you have lots of animals out there, particularly rams, right? Particularly there's a lot of mountain goats and things like that in Israel. But maybe something a little bit deeper. What's the difference between a shofar and a trumpet? Okay, so I think it's a little bit more natural, a little more primitive, a little bit return to our origins. It feels somehow more, I don't know, authentic than a trumpet. It would be weird if I told you, like, we're going to do trumpets. We're going to make the same sound when we use a trumpet. I think it would feel, there's something very natural about the shofar. The rabbis take it from the Jubilee and say, basically, we use it in the Jubilee year, we're going to use it every Rosh Hashanah. I want to look at a couple other sources just to think a little bit about that shofar and what we do with it today. So some of these are a little obscure sources, but this is what I like to do. I like to teach obscure sources that you might not have counted before. So Philo was a Jewish philosopher in the 1st century BCE. Right? He wrote in Greek. He lived in the land of Alexandria. He was a Greek-speaking Alexandrian Jew who wrote commentaries, many commentaries. And he writes something very interesting here. Immediately after, this is sort of like after a bunch of other holidays, comes the festival of the sacred new moon, in which is the custom to play the shofar. In Greek, it's not clear whether they say shofar. In the temple, at the same moment that the sacrifices are offered. For which practice this is called the Feast of Shofarot, which is interesting. Philo called what we call Rosh Hashanah, he would have called it Chag HaShofarot, the holiday of the shofar. One thing that's very interesting is, where does Philo think that you blow the shofar? Where does he say you blow the shofar? Out of it. In the temple. Right? In the temple. Right? Not outside the temple. The temple was destroyed, the final temple was destroyed in 70 CE, almost 2,000 years ago. And Philo imagines that this is a practice like sacrifices, like a lot of elements of Judaism way back then, which would have only been done in the temple, would not have been done outside the temple. Okay. But you move ahead, the next The Mishnah is like the core of the text of the Judaism that we practice today. It is the oldest of the texts that were created by the rabbis. Right? And we, all Jews today, are inheritors of the system of observance that we get from the rabbis. And they say something very interesting. If Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah fell on Shabbat, they would blow the shofar in the temple, but not in the country, outside the temple. Meaning, to Yom Tov is the holiday. Right? If the first day of Rosh Hashanah, back then Rosh Hashanah was only one day, makes sense. Right? Fell on Shabbat, they wouldn't blow the shofar anywhere but inside the temple. And I'm not going to get into why, but I want you to notice, what do you learn on a regular day, not on Shabbat? Where do they blow the shofar? On a regular day. On Shabbat, they would only blow it in the temple. I'm not going to go into why. But on a regular day, where would they blow it? Everywhere. Everywhere. Right? Everywhere. Only on Shabbat was the temple the only place the shofar was blown. Every other day of the week, when Rosh Hashanah fall, any other day of the week, the shofar was blown everywhere. And that's really, I think, something very special about this holiday. I'm not going to read the other text over here, but there's very little, like, the temple was a place where we didn't just sing and think, but we had, like, real stuff. It was a very, in English we use the word visceral, I think. My English has deteriorated after 30 years in Israel, but it would have been something that was very tactile. You would have seen it performed. Now, today I don't think we can imagine animal sacrifices, but we can imagine much more music, and we can imagine people dressed up very fancily and gold, and really a beautiful service with all of our senses, smell, taste, sight, all of our senses, not just our intellect. And there's very little of the temple that we still do outside the temple. Judaism sort of changed, right? It's a more intellectual religion. But the shofar is one of those things. It's very potent symbol. The other thing that I think is lulav, right? Coming up on Sukkot, right? Directly taken temple practice that isn't. It seems weird, right? Here we are, Jews shaking a lulav. It seems very like people tell me it feels pagan, but not Jewish. But what that I think they mean is that it feels old, and it is. The shofar is old. And the rabbis did something very remarkable. They said the shofar doesn't stay in the temple, it goes everywhere. Right? Every Jew is obligated. And the last thing I want to point out before we sort of begin some of our tefillah, our prayers, is that the mitzvah of the shofar is not what you might have thought in the Torah is to make the sound. Right? The person who fulfills the mitzvah, again, we're not doing this today, the mitzvah of the shofar is not the one who blows the shofar. Right? What is the mitzvah? Shofar, the Rambam says, to hear, right? Which is a very different nature, right? It means it's a very participatory mitzvah. The person who blows the shofar tomorrow, Sam you're going to right? Oh no, David Creed. Sorry. Right? The person who blows the shofar is facilitating all of us in a group together performing a mitzvah, something ponderable. That there is very, I think it's the only mitzvah that you performed by hearing by your ears. Right? Most mitzvot are either performed by your hands, doing them, or maybe by your mouth by saying something, but it's a mitzvah you perform by hearing. Yeah, thank you for asking the question.
I think I understand why we don't go to shofar today.
Yeah.
Can you give some explanation as to why it was once blown?
Okay, I give you two explanations. I always give two
You repeat the
explanations.
question.
Right? She asked, thank you, I'll repeat the question. She asked why we don't blow the shofar on Shabbat. But they used to blow the shofar on Shabbat. So it's not something that they never did before. So I think that historically the answer lies in the fact that Rosh Hashanah is 2 days. In the ancient world, let's say until the 4th century, the calendar wasn't set. Meaning they never knew, Jews have a lunar month. And lunar months can either be 29 or 30 days. So when you get to day 30 of a month, you never know, is this the last day of the previous month or the first day of the next month? Because the 30th day could be either one. Okay? It's a little bit of a complicated system, but the lunar months don't always add up to solar years. Right? It's not a perfect match between them. So every month they'd have to determine, based on looking at the moon, whether it was day 20, whether it was day 30 most of the time, it doesn't matter that much. But on Rosh Hashanah, it matters a lot because it's a holiday. So what eventually happened was they developed a 2-day system, which is still what we do today, because either day could have been Rosh Hashanah. Now, the problem was, how do they communicate in the ancient world? Communication was much more difficult, obviously. So the place where they would decide what day of the year it was or what day of the month it was Jerusalem, in the temple. That's where the central court sat. So they would know, today is Rosh Hashanah. But it would take a long time to get the message out to other people. Right? In other words, it was very hard. Now on Shabbat, they generally didn't want to blow the shofar unless they had to, unless they knew it was Rosh Hashanah. So in the temple, they knew today is Rosh Hashanah or today is not Rosh Hashanah. But even like, let's say, a day's walk outside, not to mention 2 or 3 days or 10 days, they wouldn't have known for a long time. So they developed 2 strategies. One was to do Rosh Hashanah 2 days, which we continue to do. And the other was not to blow the shofar on the first day if it was Rosh Hashanah. Right? Because they would know that you can always do it on the second day. Like we have an out. We have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, so we're not losing the shofar. But it does feel like a lot. So that's I think the main reason. Other scholars seem to think that like Shabbat's a very important mitzvah in Judaism, and they wanted to keep Shabbat distinct. So like today is Shabbat. It's easy to forget because it feels like Rosh Hashanah, but today is also Shabbat. So there are a lot of things that we don't have Purim. Never falls on Shabbat. We just don't do Purim on Shabbat, and the lulav. You don't wave the lulav on Shabbat. It's sort of potentially to keep a conflict away between Shabbat and other holidays. It's a great question. I think the whole idea of the calendar is very interesting, but I don't want to go too into that. All right, we are going to move ahead. There is a lot of text learning in these sheets, but we're not going to be able to do all of them in one day. So my hope is that this service will continue for, let's say, many years. And over the course of the years, we'll continue to learn more and we'll become a more knowledgeable group of people. My plan for this is not to be a 1-year learn everything kind of event, but the kind of thing that you can come back to every year and learn more and grow and learn about Rosh Hashanah. But that is enough learning for right now. We will do a little bit more learning later on. We're going to turn to page 9, and we are doing an abbreviated Shachris. Sammy is going to lead us in the sort of introduction to Shachris on page 9. Then we'll do the Chassid Kaddish, and then I'll explain. I'm going to try to explain what we're doing as we go through it, just to make sure everybody's comfortable where we are. All right, Sammy.
All right. HaMelech Yoshev Al Kisei Ram Venisa Shochenat Marom Vekadosh Shemo Vechatu Verarnu Tzadikim Badonai La Yesharim Navatehila Befi Yesharim Titromam Uverivrei Tzadikim Titbarach Uilshon Chasidim Titkadash Uvekerev Kedoshim Titalal.
Please rise. We're going to do the Chassid Kaddish on page 9, and then we're going to go into the Barfu on page 10, which we'll recite responsibly.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash meraba Ve'amal divrachute Ve'amlich malchute V'chayachon v'yamechon Uv'chaydecho Beit Yisrael V'agalav v'zman kariv Yimeru amen Yehesh meraba mevorach Le'olam l'amei amaya Yitbarach
Yitbarach v'ishtabach v'itpar v'tzram v'naseh v'itadar v'itala v'italal shemedi kudesha berichu leila uleila min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Baruchu et Adonai Amvorach.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach.
Baruch Adonai Amvorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or v'rechoshech Oseh shalom uvoretz hakol.
Amen. You may be seated. We're going to move to the Shema now. The Shema is really the central prayer every day, 365 days a year. It's recited both in the morning and in the evening. We're going to recite the whole thing together. The first line, I tried to transliterate everything that I want you guys to say. Try to say together. We're going to do the first line together. The second line is recited silently every day of the year except for Yom Kippur. And then we're going to read the first, we're going to chant the first paragraph together.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavecha ubechol nafshecha ubechol meyodecha ve'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'beitecha u'beleftecha b'derech u'b'shovbecha u'b'kumecha u'kshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha u'chsavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha.
All right, we're going to move into the Amidah. The Amidah is the central prayer. The Shema is, it's not really a prayer, it's a recitation of verses from the Torah. But the Amidah is a prayer composed by human beings, by the rabbis. It's recited every day throughout the year, traditionally 3 times a day most of the time. There's always, on holidays, there's a 4th Amidah, which you may be familiar, we call it a Musaf, which means an additional prayer. So Shabbat, or Rosh Hashanah, all the holidays, we have a Musaf, an additional opportunity to say the Amidah. And one time a year, there are 5 Amidahs a day, and that is on Yom Kippur. There's an additional service in the Elah at the very end. Most of the time throughout the year, the Amidah is sort of the same thing, morning, afternoon, and evening. On holidays, it changes to adapt a little bit to the needs and the themes of the day. Also, most of the time during the week, the Amidah contains requests for all sorts of human needs: health, rain so that we can have crops, intelligence, safety, things that we need and we ask God for, that most human beings all around the world, whether you're Jewish or not, need. On the festivals and on Shabbat, as a tradition, we don't ask God. We don't ask God for things. We consider ourselves satisfied with what we have on Shabbat and on the festivals. So the Amidah has another focus and talks more about the themes of the day. The way we're going to do the Amidah here in our learning service is we're going to do the beginning together. There are a couple points of bowing. I'm not going to tell you right now what to do. Just don't worry if people fret a little bit about getting the motions right. Look around, try to follow what we're doing, but really it's okay. However you do it, don't feel too bad if you don't feel like you're doing it right. We're going to chant the beginning together with Sammy. We're going to do the Kedusha, is sort of the part where we usually all gather together. In any case, we're going to do that together. And then we're going to have on page 13 an opportunity for the silent Amidah. I realize this is a little hard. This is like the silent prayer is the harder part, I think, of tefillot, of services. So whatever you're comfortable with, if you're comfortable reading the Hebrew, great. If you're comfortable reading the English, that's also great. And if neither of them works for you, I would just think, use the time and think about 4 or 5 minutes to think about the themes of the day, things that are important to you. It is an opportunity for some reflection. So we're going to begin. Are there any questions about that? Okay. We're going to stand the whole time. We're going to begin on page 10 together with sing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Ha'el HaGadol Hagibor ve'anora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim Vekonei Hakol Vezocher Chaste Avot Umevi Goel Livnei V'neihem Leman Shemo Ve'ava Zochreinu lachayim, melech hafetz b'chayim, v'chotveinu b'sefer hachayim, v'chotveinu b'sefer hachayim, lemancha Elohim chayim, melech ozer, U'Moshiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham. Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayim etim atah, Rav le'Hoshia, Mechalkel chayim b'chesed, Mechayim etim berachamim rabim, Somech noflim verofech olim, Umatir asurim, Umekayim emunato lishenei afar. Umatzmiach Yeshua Michamocha Avarachamim Zocher Yetzurav Lachayim Berachamim V'nemanata Lachayot Metim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayeh HaMetim.
Bottom of page 11.
Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam Keshem shemakdishim oto Bishmei marom Kakatuv al yad neviecha Bekara zeh ve'amar Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Velo chol haaretz kevodo. Az bekol Rosh Gadol, Adir v'chazak mashmim kol, Minasim leyumat serafim, leyumatam baruch yomeru, Baruch Kevod Adonai Mimkomo שלום חמלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון, בקרוב בימינו, לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש, בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה מלכותך, כדבר אמור בשירי עוזך, על ידי דוד משיח צדקך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור, לדור ודור. Hallelujah.
Page 13.
לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קודנך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קודנך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך, קדושתך נקדיש. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך, קדושתך נקדיש. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד. כי אל מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה.
Continue silently on page 13 through 17. Still praying, please continue. We're going to sing together the Sim Shalom on page 16.
Sim, sim, sim shalom, sim shalom tova uvracha ba'olam. Sim, sim, sim shalom, Tova uvracha. Chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. Baruchenu avinu kulanu ke'echad be'or panecha sim shalom tova uvracha ba'olam sim shalom tova uvracha. Ki be'or panecha natarta lanu Adonai Eloheinu Torat chaim ve'avat chesed tzedaka uvracha v'rachamim v'chaim v'shalom sim shalom tova uvracha ba'olam sim shalom tova uvracha v'tov beinecha levarech et amecha Yisrael v'chol eitu v'chol shah b'shlomecha sim shalom tova uvracha ba'olam sim shalom tova uvracha.
Bottom of page 16, the
Besefer
Sefer Chaim.
Chaim bracha v'shalom ufarnasa tzova eni zacher v'eni katev lefanecha eni zacher v'eni katev lefanecha anachnu bechol amcha beit Yisrael lechaim tovim uleshalom lechaim tovim uleshalom.
You might notice there's two parts on page 16 that are in bold. Those are the central themes that you're all probably familiar with on Rosh Hashanah throughout Yom Kippur. This is the time of year when we look forward to thinking about hope for the future, hope that we'll have a healthy life, hope that our families, our loved ones, our friends, all the people we know will have a healthy life, will be inscribed in the book of life for the year to come. It's the time of the year, we're going to talk more about this a little bit later on, when we realize the fragility of life. Probably many of you unfortunately know people who have passed over the past year. And we all know that we can't take our time on earth for granted. And that's one of the major themes of Rosh Hashanah. It's a time where we slow down and we don't just go on our business, our everyday working and all the responsibilities we have, but we really pause and think for a moment about how it's important to take advantage of every moment of every day, that our lives and the lives of people around us are a gift, and that we need to think about that. We need to think about the importance of appreciating the gifts that we have been given. So that's a major, probably the most important theme of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and it's one that's especially added to the liturgy, to the prayers. Those are things that we only say between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The rest of the year, we live our lives. But between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we really think about that. And we're going to continue to talk about that as we go along. We're going to move to page 18 for the Kaddish Shalem, and then we'll sit down for a minute. Go ahead.
Yitzkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah ve'alma divrach u'rutei v'amlich machutei b'chayechon v'mechon uv'chaydecho beit Yisrael b'agalav izman kariv imru amen Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Le'olam Le'amei Amaya, Yitzbarach Vishtabach, Vitzbar Vitzram Vinasei, Vitadar Vitala Vitala Shmei Shabrichu, Leilu Leila Mikol Birchata V'Shiratat, Hushuchatam Nachamata, Dalmi Rabba Mavimru, Amen. Titkabal Tzlotan Devotan L'chol Beit Yisrael, Kodam Uvohan Divishmai Vimru, Amen. Yesh Lama Rabba Mit Shamai V'chaim, Alein Aval Kol Yisrael Vimru, Amen. Oseh Shalom Reveaseh Shalom, Aleinu Val Kol Yisrael V'meru, Amen.
Amen. All right, you can sit down for a second here. We're going to do an abbreviated Torah service. Usually, if you're familiar with Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur services, I don't know, the Aliyot, the honor to have the lead, the Torah is assigned months before it's a big thing. I remember my father was the chazan growing up, and I remember him and the ritual committee having to figure out a long time who was going to get which aliyah. We're going to do things a little bit differently in Nisayon, and I would like, we're going to need some volunteers. So don't be afraid. We're going to do 3 aliyot. If you have never done the aliyah before, you can do it in English. We have a translation. It is perfectly okay to read the blessings in English. If you would like to read them in Hebrew, that's also obviously okay. But we're going to need 3 volunteers. The only requirement is if anyone's under bar mitzvah age. We generally don't give aliyot. Most of you are probably above bar mitzvah. So only people are above bar mitzvah age. So those are 3 aliyot. There's also going to be an opportunity for someone to open the Aron. So that's a 4th thing. And then someone to lift up the Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah is very heavy, I was told. So maybe somebody who's been to the gym a few times this year to lift up the Sefer Torah. And then someone to wrap the Sefer Torah. All right, so that's, I believe, 6 things I need people for. So don't be shy. First aliyah, raise your hand. Okay, I might not remember everybody, but I call up first aliyah, second aliyah. All genders are fine too, by the way. Third aliyah. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Open we could take 1 or 2 people for opening the ark.
You don't have to be bar mitzvah to do that.
Okay, you're going to open up the ark. Great, wonderful. Someone to lift up the Torah. Awesome. Have in mind. And someone to wrap the Torah. This is a little bit easier one. Be done. Oh, you're going to wrap the Torah. Great, wonderful. All right, we got everybody. Thank you very much for bravely volunteering. Please just come up when it's your turn. I'm not going to remember exactly who did what. So we're on page 18 with the service of taking out the Torah.
Ein kamocha ba'Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kemasecha, malchutcha malchut, kol olamim, umemshaltecha, bechol dor v'dor, Adonai melech, Adonai molech, Adonai imloch, le'olam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai evarech, et amo v'shalom, avarachamim, etiv avitzoncha, et Sion, tivneh chomot Yerushalayim, kivecha levad batachnu, melech el ram venisa, Adon olamim.
All right, please rise. Open the Torah. And then we're going to walk around. We're just going to walk probably in the middle. So maybe we'll walk around. I think we're just going to walk around once. So we'll walk around the middle. If you want to kiss the Torah, squeeze in. It's not so important. Okay.
Vayhi bin Saron, vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, ve'afutzu oivecha, ve'anusu misanecha mipanecha, ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Udevar Adonai miYerushalayim. Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah. Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah. Le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato.
All right, let me just tell you what page we're on. We are on page 19 in the middle of the page. We're going to recite responsively where it says the Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh V'nora Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh V'nora Shemo.
Gadol Adonai iti, u'neromem Hashemo yachdav. Lecha Adonai
Hagedula, V'hagevura, V'hatiferet, V'hanetzach, V'hahod. Rosh, Romemu. Ve'ishtachavu le'adom ragav kadoshu romemu Adonai Eloheinu
ve'ishtachavu le'adam ragav kadoshu ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Do you want to do it over here?
That one? You can wait for it to sit then.
Is the microphone on?
You just
You know what's fun?
We're gonna do it over here. Huh? I don't know. All right. All right. You may be seated. Let's just make sure we're in the right spot. Here we go. Right there. All right. So we are about to read the Torah reading. The Torah reading today, just a brief introduction. There are 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, as we know, right? The central theme of the Torah reading is tomorrow's Torah reading, which is about the sacrifice or the attempted, almost aborted sacrifice of Isaac. And today is the paragraph that comes before it. It talks about when Isaac was born. There's a deeper explanation of why the rabbis chose this Torah reading for Rosh Hashanah, and that is that I think as Jews, when we think about the world, we think of it primarily through the lens of our family, of our own children, of our own parents, and our community, and of our nation. We don't only think globally, right? The creation of the world, we think about the creation of our own children. And I think that's very natural as human beings. The world is such a big place. It's very hard to think about the importance of the entire world. But I know for me, probably the most life-changing experience in my entire life was the birth of my first child. I remember very much thinking that I had just radically changed who I was as a person. Every time I would look at another person, I would think, you know what, that person child of somebody. Right? Everybody in the world is the child of somebody. Everybody in the world has parents, right? Or most people hopefully do. Have parents who really care for them and love them. Right? Having children and being part of a family is the core experience of being human, right? Of caring for the people around you. And Abraham, when we think about the story, it's a very powerful story. Abraham was told a few chapters ago that he was going to be the father of a great nation. Right? And he was going to be the leader of his people. And yet, on a personal level, he had not yet succeeded in having a child of his own life, which is a very common experience for many human beings, and a common experience in the Bible. And that's what our Torah reading is about. It's a powerful story. And then the second aliyah is something that unfortunately many of us, perhaps all of us know, the family brings with it also conflict and difficulty. The people that you love the most are also the people that you get angry at the most, the people that you yell at the most. I don't want to say hate, that's too strong of a word, but the people you care for the most are also the people often who hurt you the most. So family is a difficult thing, but it's what our Torah reading is about. The Torah doesn't hide and pretend that family is our unending joy and pleasure. Don't you wish that family is unending joy and pleasure? But family is meaningful. And when things are meaningful, they have both sides because we care about how they come out. So that's what our Torah reading is about. It's a beautiful and sometimes distressing passage because it doesn't always end up good for everybody. And I think that that's an opportunity to reflect on our own family situations. So we're going to start on page 20 with the Torah reading. I believe the first over here. So when you come up, traditionally you give your Hebrew name. Right? If you don't know your Hebrew name, that's fine. We'll work something out. And your parents' names. Right? If you don't know that also, you can use English names. It's perfectly okay. But if you do know your Hebrew name, that's also wonderful. Yamod, Yad Ben Nechel, Rishon. Okay. We're on page 20 in the middle of the page, right there. In the first paragraph. You start this.
Okay, yeah. Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'nasan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Evadonai pekadet Sarah kasher amar v'yas Adonai Sarah kasher diber v'tar v'tedet Sarah l'Avraham ben nizkunav l'moed asher diber oto Elohim v'ikra Avraham et shemeno anodado asher dalo Sarah Yitzchak וימול אברהם את יצחק בנו בן 8 ימים כאשר ציווה אותו אלוהים. Just kiss it with your talus right here.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Right, the first aliyah, you might have noticed just a couple things to notice. First of all, Yitzchak is born, Isaac is born. His name means laughter, but really can just mean joy because his mother was 90. Right? My kids would always come to me, Savta, Grandma, can she have another baby? No, they never say anything. But Sarah had one at 90. That's probably not going to happen. But she does have this miraculous child after all of her life thinking she wasn't going to have a child, and she names him Laughter and Joy because she's so overjoyed to have him. And it's also Isaac is not the first person to have the covenant of circumcision. Abraham and Ishmael had that earlier, but Isaac is the first person to have that on the 8th day, which is a tradition goes all the way back to really the second person in our family line, back to Isaac, and since then, Jewish males have always been circumcised on the 8th day, as long as it's medically possible. All right, we're going to move to the second aliyah. Yehuda ben Yaakov Sheni, and your son. Wait.
Baruch et Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Avraham ben me'at shana bivaled lo et Yitzchak beno v'tomer Sarah tzchok asali Elohim kol hashomei yitzchak li v'tomer mimi lel Avraham eni kavanim Sarah kilati ve'en lizkunav v'yigdal hayeled v'yigamal v'yas Avraham mishte gadol b'yom yigamel et Yitzchak.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
You can hear guys who are there. You can sit down. All right, we're actually, because it's Shabbat, on Shabbat the aliyot are broken up a little bit differently. So you might have noticed Sammy stopped on the bottom of page 20, which is sort of in the middle, if you're following along in English, on page 21. We're going to continue on the bottom of page 20 with the third aliyah. Ta'amod etka shingo bat Shimon Alex Bebrina Sibia Shlishit.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai. Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. V'tereh Sarat ben Agar hamitzrit asher yadav Avraham etzachek v'tomel Avraham garesh hamazot v'et bena ki lo yirash ben hamazot imeni im Yitzchak v'yirad davar meod b'nei Avraham al odot beno ויאמר אלוהים אל אברהם אל ירא בעיניך על הנער ואמתך כל אשר דמר אליך שרה שמע בקולה כי ויצחק יגאל לך זרע.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. You might have noticed that there's probably the best advice ever given in the Bible is on page 21 over there. Something that I should try to remember better this year. Whatever Sarah tells you, do. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says. I don't know about your relationships with your wife. For me, it's my wife. But I know that my life would be 100% better if everything my wife told me to do, I would say. So that's what happens to Abraham. God specifically tells him, listen to your wife, which is in Hebrew we call Eitz HaTorah, some good advice. So that's going to be the Torah reading for today. Tomorrow we're going to do the second half of the Torah reading. We're now going to do the lifting up of the Sefer Torah and the wrapping of it, and then we're going to return to the Sefer Torah. So, warm it up there.
Who's wrapping the Sefer Torah?
Wrapping? Great. All right. The other thing the wrapper does is very important, is to spot, right? You guys have been to the gym, you know what spotters are, right? You don't want to let the Torah fall, just like you don't want to let the bar
It's
fall.
very
So
heavy on this side,
think of
so we
yourself as a
just get
rabbit
a lot of
more important
leverage
than
and then
the
prop it up like that.
Yeah, get leverage on it. Fix your eyes.
And just try to open it a little
You're gonna sit
spot,
down.
and then we're gonna see you right there. So
Don't watch for there.
Whatever I want.
Bezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai ve'ad Moshe.
It is a very heavy Sefer Torah. And it's all on one side, so.
Eitz Chaim hi, lama chazikim ba. Eitz Chaim hi, lama chazikim ba. Zeracheha tarcheino.
And you guys come back, you can sit down. So thank you to everybody, Adolina, you're a great review, all did a great job. Thanks for not dropping the Sefer Torah. That's not good. And I promise you the Torah won't get lighter over the next couple of years. So if you want to help out, we're going to go to the gym this year, work out, and we can have lots of people lifting the Sefer Torah. We're not going to do, I said traditionally there is another Amidah, another silent prayer on Rosh Hashanah. We do 4 a day. We're not going to do that. We're going to do a couple, we'll talk a little bit, a couple of the highlights. And I want to look at page 23. It's really one of the most beautiful prayers, one of the most moving prayers in the Jewish liturgy for the entire year. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who was the chief rabbi of England, and really a wonderful writer, one of the best writers about Judaism in the modern age, he called it the liturgical equivalent of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. It was just a beautiful, beautiful poetry. And there's a legend that goes along with it that I want to read from you. The legend is probably not historically accurate, but it's a beautiful story and it's meaningful, and I think it's something that all Jews should know. So it's on page 23. I'm going to actually read it all with you together. There's a famous legend behind this stirring prayer, as recorded in the 13th century work, Or Zarua, by Rabbi Yitzhak of Vienna. In the section dealing with laws of Rosh Hashanah, he writes, I found a letter from Rabbi Ephraim of Rome, in which he wrote that Rabbi Amnon of Mainz, another city in Germany, authored the Umatana Token, that's the Hebrew name of this prayer, as a result of a tragic incident in his life. This is the story as recorded in the letter. Rabbi Amnon of Mainz, a great scholar, a person of wealth, a handsome man of noble ancestry, was under great pressure from the lords and archbishop of the city to change his faith to Christianity and adopt their religion. He repeatedly ignored them on one occasion. In order to put them off, he asked for 3 days to consider the request. Afterwards, he was heartbroken because he had given the impression that he might actually consider renouncing his belief in the one living God. He refused food or drink, weeping bitterly over his vows. He refused to accept the sympathy and consolation of friends and relatives. At the end of the 3 days, he was summoned by the archbishop, and he ignored the summons. A distinguished delegation was sent to ask him to appear at the court, but he refused them. Finally, he was brought before the court by force, and the archbishop demanded, why did you not come and answer me as you promised? Rabbi Amnon answered, as a punishment, you should have my tongue cut out, because my tongue deceived you. Rabbi Amnon thought to sanctify God's name in this manner, since his tongue had uttered such a promise. The archbishop replied, no, I will not cut out your tongue, for it spoke well. Instead, I will cut off your feet, for they did not bring you to me. The tyrant ordered that his hands and feet be cut off in piecemeal fashion, asking him at each interval if he was willing to renounce his faith. He was finally released and sent home with severed and mutilated limbs beside him in bed. The holiday of Rosh Hashanah was at hand, and the rabbi, dying from the effects of his wounds, was at his own request carried into the synagogue, bringing his severed limbs with him. When the Chazan was about to recite the Kedusha, Rabbi Amnon asked him to stop, saying, "Pause, that I may sanctify his most holy name." And he said in a loud voice, "U'bechein lecha tzaveh Kedusha," and thus may this sanctification descend to you. Inferring with his terrible suffering, he had sanctified God's name. He then began reciting the Talmud Tokeh, and with the words, "Emet ki atahu dayan u'mochia," true, that you are judge and admonisher, he indicated his acceptance of God's divine judgment. And with the words, "Tichtov gzar dinah," and he recorded the decree of their judgments, he manifested his belief that his fate had been decreed on Rosh Hashanah. No sooner had he finished the prayer when he expired. 3 days later, it appeared to Rabbi Colonius ben Meshulam in a dream and taught him this prayer, asking him to use it to all congregations as a testimonial, as a memorial for him. This prayer has formed a portion of our service ever since. So, I just want to say a couple words about this prayer, and then Sammy's going to lead us through some of the singing of it. I'm not a believer that the point of Judaism is to constantly prevail despite the people who oppose us. I don't, when I think about the importance of being Jewish, it's about the joy and the meaning and the love and the community and the nationality and the language and the prayers and the mitzvot and the commandments. There's a lot of positive. And when I think about Judaism, I usually focus on the positive. But there is, I do think, an importance to remember how hard and how much suffering our ancestors went through. Being Jewish in the Middle Ages, being Jewish 100 years ago was very, very difficult. I don't think I need to tell you about that. So I do think, again, my belief in Judaism comes from a positive aspect, a place of joy and of meaning. But occasionally, at times, I do think it's important to remember. I spend my life studying the words of the rabbis. And every once in a while, I'm reminded that, well, this rabbi wrote these really meaningful, important, impressive, difficult words that I spent my life studying, and he was executed later on in his life, oftentimes by the church. And we have a 3,000-year-old garden to continue to tend and to continue to make survive. It is a responsibility that I feel from time to time towards my ancestors. The prayer, though, isn't just about death. The prayer is about the fragility of life. It really is a beautiful prayer. There are some sections which I urge you, we might read some of them together in English towards the end. But it's a sensitive prayer that causes us to reflect on really just how fragile our lives are. I'll speak for myself. I'm 53 years old. No one told me that at my age, some friends were going to start dying. Right? It's a common experience as you get older. Your parents start to pass, and it's not statistically unlikely for people to die. We had a child, unfortunately, in my community, a 12-year-old, who died this year tragically. And I'm sure all of you could share stories and reflections of people who didn't make it through the year. Fortunately, all of us have, and fortunately for most of us, most of the people we know have. But it is an opportunity to think and appreciate the value of life, the value of finding joy and meaning and love and community and family in every day. So we're going to follow along with Sammy on page 24 within the Talmud Tokef. And again, if the words in Hebrew are not familiar, they're hard words. I urge you to think and reflect on the meaning in English, which is there.
ונתנה תוקף קדושת היום, כי הוא נורא ואיום, נורא ואיום, ובו תנשא מלכותך, ויקון בחסד כיסאך, ותשב עליו ותשב עליו באמת. אמת כי אתה הוא דיין, כי אתה הוא דיין, ומוכיח ויודע בעת, וחותם וסופר ומונה, וחותם וסופר ומונה, ותזכור כל הנשכחות, ותזכור כל הנשכחות, ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות, ומאליו יקרא וחותם יד כל אדם בו. ובשופר גדול ייתקע, וכל דממה דקה יישמע, ומלאכים יחפזון, וחילולי ידי יאחזון, ומלאכים יחפזון, וחילולי ידי יאחזון, ויאמרו הנה יום הדין, לפקוד צבא מרום בדין, כי לא יזכו בניך בדין, וכל באי עולם יעברו לפניך כבני מרום, כבקרת רועה עדרו, מעביר צאנו תחת שבטו, כן תעביר ותספור ותמנה ותפקוד נפש כל חי, ותחתוך קצבה לכל בריאה, ותכתוב גזר דינם, ובשופר גדול ייתקע, וכל דממה דקה יישמע, ומלאכים יחפזון, וחילולי ידי יאחזון, בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון.
Let's read together in the English a couple of the paragraphs on page 25. On Rosh Hashanah it is inscribed, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed. How many shall pass away, and how many shall be born? Who shall live, and who shall die? Who in good time, and who by untimely death? Who by water, and who by fire? Who by sword, and who by wild beast? Who by famine, and who by thirst? Who by earthquake, and who by plague? Who by strangulation, and who by appellation? Who shall have rest, and who wander? Who shall be at peace, and who pursues? Who shall be serene, and who tormented? Who shall become impoverished, and who wealthy? Who shall be debased, and who exalted? But repentance, prayer, and righteousness avert the severity of the decree.
כמה יברון וכמה יברון, מי יחיה ומי ימות, מי בקיצו ומי לא בקיצו, מי במים ומי באש, מי בחרב ומי בחיה, מי ברעש ומי במגפה, מי ינוח ומי ינוע, מי שקט ומי טרף, מי שלב ומי יתייסר, מי שלב ומי יתייסר, מי ירום ומי ישפל, מי יישר ומי יעני, ותשובה ותפילה וצדקה, מעבירין את רוע הגזירה.
Let's read the last paragraph on page 25 together where it says, we come from dust. We come from dust and return to dust. We labor our lives to bread. We are like broken shards, like dry grass, like a withered flower. Like a passing shadow and a vanishing cloud, like a breeze that passes, like dust that scatters, like a fleeting dream, like you are the king who lives eternally. I want you to notice as we finish up today, just the tension that appears in this prayer. We have this notion in the beginning that everything is written on Rosh Hashanah. Everything is written and everything's sealed. And somehow our fate is already determined. And there's sometimes in life where I think you go through feeling that like your direction is set, the way things are going to be, that's the way they're going to be, and it's very hard to move off that path. A lot of times our lives have been set already from childhood, from our youth, from when we were maybe in our 20s and 30s. We got on a certain path, and that's the way we are. And that's true a lot of the time. But the prayer also has the second half of that, and that is that tshuva, changing, prayer, hoping and asking for better, and tzedakah, doing good things, can really make a change in our life. I think we all live with that tension throughout all our lives. It is very hard to change. Probably many of you have been through Rosh Hashanah before and said, there are things I'm going to do differently this year, small things, big things, the things I'm going to do differently, and then the next year you're there again and you're saying, there's things I'm going to do differently this year. It's the same thing you said last year. But every once in a while, there is a possibility. You said to yourself at the beginning of the year, I'm going to change this, and you did. We all know that change for the better, hopefully, is possible, but extremely difficult. And the prayer admits that a lot of things are determined in our lives. But the prayer also points out that that's not the last word. The end of the prayer is that there is a possibility of tshuva, repentance, changing who we are, tefillah, praying and hoping that we can become better people. And tzedakah, and actually doing that and giving to other people can make a change in our lives. So we're going to conclude with the Aleinu, which is on page. We're going to conclude with the Aleinu on page 30, and then we're going to do the Mortis Kaddish, and then we're going to do it from David Krieger. So please rise for the Aleinu on page 30.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tetz gedula le'yotzer v'reishit, shelo asanu kegoyei haratzot, velo somanu kemishpachot adama, shelo sam chelkeinu gahem, v'gor aleinu kechol amonam, ve'anachnu korim, mishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei amlachim, hakadosh baruch hu, shehu noteh shamayim ve'yosed haaretz, u'mashav yikaro shmayim imal, u'shlinatu zog v'meromim, hu Eloheinu einod, emed malkeinu evezulato, kakatuv b'torato, v'datayom ve'ashevot elevavecha, ki Adonai hu Elohim, b'shamayim imal, ve'al haaretz mitachat einod. V'nemar ve'aya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, v'yomahu yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
Mourner's Kaddish on page 31. If you want to stay standing, you're welcome to. If not, you can sit down. Yitkadav yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Ya'amad yivrach yiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh. B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechobei Yisrael. Ba'agara uvizman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam umei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yidadar v'yidarev v'yidalal shmei dekudeshat b'richu. Le'ira u'le'ira min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama Rabbah min shamaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'romav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. You can be seated. Just before I invite David up to say a couple last words, and then we're going to do Adon Olam right afterwards. Tomorrow morning we're going to do this again. I would love for everyone to come back. We will do different discussion. I also, I'm going to be here from 10:30 in the chapel tomorrow morning. We won't start till 11, but if anyone wants to come and has anything that they just want to ask, other questions about other things, I'm happy to sit and have a discussion, whatever interests you. I'm here from 10:30 available, and if no one comes, and I'll sit and read. But if you would like to come and talk, that would be great. And then we'll start at 11, and like I said, we will finish tomorrow also at 12. Yeah, please don't bring your books home. Take your books. Please leave your books over here. We need them for tomorrow. If people after Rosh Hashanah want a PDF, I can send you a PDF. That's very easy to do. But the physical books need to be left here. So David, and then we'll do Adon Olam.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Chag Sameach. First of all, obviously a big Yesher Koach to Rabbi Dr. Kulp and to Sammy Moses for leading the services, for all the ushers who have helped, for all of you who had Torah Aliyahs. It's wonderful to have you here with this new format, and it's great to see so many of you in attendance. Please be here tomorrow. It's so wonderful in the entire building. There's a huge vibe that we haven't had for some time, and it is good to have you. One of my missions as past president and on the Chesed committee is to ask people for help. We do annually, this time of year, run this Chesed appeal, and of course, your help is very needed. Our shul supports a number of programs, our kosher food bank, and if you've ever been here on a Wednesday morning, you'll see way too many people, needy people who need help. Our kosher food bank supplies only kosher food, although kosher food is not necessarily needed by everybody. And the demand over the years has been extreme. In fact, we stayed open during COVID, and we found the demand has increased even since COVID. So that funding of that program, A, we're buying kosher food, B, we're buying it, is extensive, and we ask for your help. We have an Out of the Cold program that we had many years ago, you'll recall, and then with COVID, that program ended here at Beth Sholom, but we were continued to sponsor and we continue to fund that program, although it was held at a different location. But the need again there has increased to the point where the Out of the Cold program is providing 6,000 meals a week. Just to give you an indication of a lot of stuff that we don't see when we live here in this part of the city. Again, we contribute. That program is moving back into our building, and we will continue. We will not have overnight sleepovers, but we'll continue to provide a kosher hot meal, entertainment, clothes, socks, whatever people need. It's a cold, long winter, and many people sadly are not homed. And lastly, of course, our Peace of Mind program, and these are just 3 examples of the Chesed. Our Peace of Mind program, as you may know, brings in a former military unit of Israeli soldiers, most of whom have admitted to experiencing PTSD issues. And they come here, and I've spoken to soldiers who have been here for the week for the last number of years, and they all tell me how impactful and how important this is. And we have all kinds of other Chesed programs. So I'm saying all these things, and running a shul, a nonprofit, it costs money. And beyond your membership, we do all kinds of fundraising. So I do want to bring your attention to our brochure, our kosher booklet. It has all kinds of programming, some of which ultimately end up in fundraising that goes to Chesed. Beyond that, though, we have these cards that are outside this room because of the seating. We couldn't give you, but your name, if you've got a ticket here, your name will be on a card just outside. I ask you to take a moment. All you have to do is tip over a tab, and there's a box there for you to insert. You can have us contact you, or you can just have it charged to your credit card. And I'm personally, I would much rather have everybody give $1 than 50% of the people give $3. So if you can, please participate. This card says on it, the world stands on three things: on the Torah, on the service of God, and upon acts of loving kindness. Pirkei Avot. And I'm going to ask you to, after the service, please go outside, and if you can help. That's wonderful. And if you can't, we understand. With that, again, a big yesher koach to all of you who are attending, and to Sammy and Dr. Culp, Rabbi Dr. Culp, for being here. I hope you enjoyed the service. The service will conclude on page 31. Sammy's going to bring us home with the Adon Olam.
Adon Olam, Hashem Alach, B'terem Kol, Yetzir Nivra, Beit Nasa, Bechefzo Kol, Azai Melech, Shemo Nikra, Be'acharei, Kichlot HaKol, Levado, Imloch Nora, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Hoveh, Ve'hu Yeh Betifara, Ve'hu Echad, Ve'en Sheni, Le'hamshilo, Le'achbira, Ve'li Tachlit, Ve'lo Ha'oz, Ve'am Yisra, Ve'hu Eli, Ve'chai Goali, Ve'tzur Chevli, Ve'etzara, Ve'yunisi, Umanosli, Menat kosi beyom ekram, Meyado avkid ruchi, Beit Ishan ve'ayiram, Ve'im ruchi yevi'ati, Adonai li ve'lo ira. Adon Olam Hashem Alach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra, Le'nasa Bechefzo Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, Be'acharei Kichlot HaKol, Levado Imloch Nora, Ve'hu Haya Ve'hu Hoveh, Hu Yeh Betifara. Adon Olam Hashem Alach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra, Le'nasa Bechefzo Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra, Be'acharei Kichlot HaKol, Levado Imloch Nora, Ve'hu Haya Ve'hu Hoveh, Betifara, Ve'hu Haya Ve'hu Hoveh, Betifara. Shana Tova.